rest in peace to the following people: Glynis Johns, David Soul, Christian Oliver, Ed Canto, Bud Harrelson, Alec Musser, Norman Jewison, Dexter Scott King, Carl Weathers, Toby Keefe, Mojo Nixon, Yoshitaka Murayama, Ken Melton, Chris Gauthier, Kenneth Mitchell, Ole Anderson, Virgil, Richard Lewis, Paul Vachon, Janice Burgess, Akira Toriyama, Charlie McKay, Yutaka Yoshi, Emmett Walsh, Lou Gossett Jr., Joe Flaherty, Akebono, Eleanor Coppola, Bernard Hill, Roger Corman, Susan Backliny, Dabney Coleman, Ikio Masuyama, Richard M. Sherman, Jerry West, Mike Alonzo, aka Clobbering Time, Benji Gregory, Hiroyuki Omori, Willie Mays, Donald Sutherland, Jamie Kellner, Taylor Willie, Tameo Perry, Sika Onawai, Bill Cobbs, Taki Matsuno, Martin Mull, John Landau, Shelley Duvall, Tom Weiner, Ruth Westheimer, Richard Simmons, Shannon Doherty, Jacoby Jones, Bob Newhart, Patty Yasutaki, Kevin Sullivan, Rachel Lillis, Wally Amos, Greg Kinn, Afa Onawai, Phil Donahue, Atsuko Tanaka, Sid Vicious, James Earl Jones, Chad McQueen, Tito Jackson, David Graham, Maggie Smith, John Ashton, Chris Christopherson, Dikembe Mutombo, Pete Rose, Ken Page, Robert Watts, Frank Fritz, John Amos, Doc Harris, Sissy Houston, Nobuyo Oyama, Paul Diano, Phil Lesh, David Harris, Terry Garr, Greg Hildebrandt, Quincy Jones, Elwood Edwards, Tony Todd, Bruce Deegan, Dan Hennessy, Andy Pally, Chuck Woolery, Jim Abrams, Morgan Lofting, Marshall Brickman, Bob Breyer, Scott L. Schwartz, Hudson Meek, Art Evans, Greg Gumbel, Olivia Hussey, Jimmy Carter, Linda Lavin, Angus McInnes, and Sweet Daddy Siki. May you all rest in peace. Well, in a very mysterious case of deja vu, we had a 2024 death break, or announce, I should say, in the year 2025, and I have to do a little addendum to add in now here. But Britt Allcroft, best known for adapting the Railway series into, well, Thomas the Tank Engine, died on December 27th, 2024, but the news was only broken by filmmaker Brandon Cardy on January 3rd, 2025. May she rest in peace, along with everyone else mentioned. Now that we got that bit of business done, you know how this bit of business works. We're going to recap all the games I played, the good, the bad, the ugly, and, yeah, nothing to it but to do it. Let's go. January always seems to bring the most excitement with the start of a new year, and I guess set the tone for the year. And this year started off with quite the bang in Devil May Cry 5. Now, Devil May Cry 5 as a game always intrigued me from its first announcement. I always hold the original games in very high regard. Well, maybe not so much the second one, but I don't seem to hate it as much as everyone else. Yet, in spite of this, I always would hope that we would get another entry at some point. And lo and behold, here it is. Granted, it took me years later until I got this as a gift, but that's beside the point. Anyways, Devil May Cry 5 pretty much is like the past several games here. Following the events of the fourth game, Nero works for Dante's Devil May Cry agency and his friend, who's a gunsmith, Nico Goldstein, and then eventually this mysterious hooded man known simply only as V enters. Or so we think it's V. Actually, no. Rather, V is. Well, I don't want to fully get into it because it is kind of spoilers, but by and large, Devil May Cry 5 pretty much keeps what makes the past games good and further refines the gameplay. It actually runs in the RE engine, which actually, by the way, does not stand for Resident Evil, because it, well, not quite Resident Evil here-ish, depends on how you look at it. It's also known as, I don't know what I'm going for here, it's also known as Reach for the Moon engine as well. I'm not quite sure where that idea came from, but sometimes a Resident Evil engine, other times Reach for the Moon. But still, the translation from hack and slash, like, to an engine primarily used in survival horror seemingly has gone off pretty well. I mean, I guess that's not a surprise, seeing as how the original Devil May Cry started off as one of the many discarded versions of Resident Evil 4. Still, though, it's pretty much the same ordeal as you would expect. Dante and Nero go around hacking and slashing and doing what they did in the previous game, DMC4, and yeah. So Nero actually does retain the Red Queen's sword still, as well as his Blue Rose double-barreled revolver, but he doesn't have the Devil Bringer at the start of the game. Instead, he has these Devil Breakers here, and there is a story reason for it. And they have all sorts of other functions. You can grab enemies from a distance, stop time to freeze them in place, and you can find new ones during stages. But if misused, they can break because they're fragile, even though they're powerful. Eventually, you'll get the Devil Bringer back, and you'll have the Devil Trigger move in, expanding your combat and arsenal skills. And yeah, Dante pretty much exactly plays like you did in Devil May Cry 4, sword hacking and slashing and everything. Apparently, there's a friggin' buzzsaw-like weapon that takes a motor combined into a motorcycle, a cavalier. And there's all sorts of other stuff as well, sorts of crazy weapons. Some of them do return from past games, like Kalina Ann from Devil May Cry 3, the Cerberus Nunchaku from Devil May Cry 3, yeah, and of course Devil Trigger as well. But the big new addition in Devil May Cry 5 is the mysterious character of V, who eventually basically hires Dante and his crew to track down a powerful demon known as Urizen. And that's sort of the main end goal in the game. V, though, isn't really much of a hack and slasher. Instead, he has three demons like to fight. You have an eagle named Griffin that attacks with lightning. You have a panther that forms blades, spikes, and other portals out of its body known as Shadow, and a large and powerful golem known only simply as Nightmare. V also has a Devil Trigger state as well to summon Nightmare, which is actually the just easy, can kill enemies like that. And then V, though, has to basically weaken them enough, though, and finishes Kane off with a blow. So, in a way, I feel like his gameplay contradicts with Dante and Nero, and it feels like the pacing of it kind of slows down. It turns it from a fast-paced action game into a more slower action game, more strategic, which, it gets kind of repetitive, and I feel like it kind of drags it down a little bit. But the game is still far from bad. It's very, very good when it sticks to the main stuff. And you only play as V for certain points, though, but man, is it kind of, I don't know. In spite of this, I do think Devil May Cry 5 is a pretty solid game on the whole. I don't know if I'd rank it quite my favorite. Maybe my third favorite in the series, behind 3 and 4, respectively. But on the whole, it was a pretty good game, and fans definitely are going to enjoy it. I do wonder where Capcom's going to take the franchise next, so we'll have to wait. Next up is Pikmin. And this is one of those games that I never really had a chance to play back in the day despite having a GameCube because, yeah, I've told the story a bunch of times, so I'm not going to get into it again. So, when I got my Switch for Christmas of 2023, I knew I wanted Pikmin 1 and 2. Absolutely. I had to have them. And, well, here they are. And it started with the original Pikmin. The original Pikmin had a pretty simple concept, playing as Captain Olimar, who crash lands on a mysterious planet, and through the power of these native species known as Pikmin, he has to find his ship's missing parts in order to escape within 30 days. You basically have three different types of Pikmin. Red Pikmin can deal with fire, blue Pikmin can go through water, yellow Pikmin can shock, but they can also jump higher as well. And ultimately, you only have 30 days to do so in the game, which typically lasts about 13 minutes. I'm not really a huge fan of this sort of setup, to be honest. I kind of like, I don't know, the whole time-based mechanics, I'm not usually the biggest fans of in games. Mainly just because I feel like it puts added pressure onto the player. I get it, that's part of the point with some of this, but even then, it's like, I don't know. It's it's a wild, wild game, Pikmin, because you have to go around picking up all these things. And yeah, the boss battles are crazy as well. Don't get too attached to your Pikmin because they can go down like that. And you have to get all of the parts in 30 days to at least get the good ending or the best ending. Get 25 of them, or at least the essential parts, by the end of the game, and you'll get the normal ending. And fail to meet the goal, well, that does it. You're done. Yeah, I don't know. Plus, on top of that, there's a lot more strategic elements to it as well. Having to manage the Pikmin, knowing which one to use in which situation, which one to take, striking when proper. It's a pretty wild game, all things considered, but genuinely, yeah, as of more parts you find, you open up more and then areas to go to find more parts, and yeah, you just keep going and going and going until you can't go anymore. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting game, but not for outside circumstances. I probably could have enjoyed it a little more, but what are you gonna do at this point? Eh, honestly, by the end it kind of did leave me a little drained though. I do like in Pikmin 2 how they got rid of the time ordeal, but that game also has its own set of craziness, but we'll get to that in February. So let's go on to the next game. Street Fighter V. And yeah, it's alright. It's what you expect from Street Fighter, I guess. Not a bad game entirely, but I do feel like it feels like a step back in some ways from Street Fighter 4. Because at the start, there wasn't a heck of a whole lot of content and technical issues. But over time, the game has sold a lot more. And probably didn't meet Capcom's sales expectations because the game was console exclusive on PlayStation 4, which was insane, but screw Sony. Hey, at least friggin' Street Fighter 6 actually gets an Xbox ports. Ugh. So yeah, with the Champion Edition being the most up-to-date edition here, pretty much, you do get a good chunk of the content, but there's still a lot of it that's missing in action, like at some points. Or at least it's not clear because Capcom sucks at trying to tell us, hey, this is what we gotta do here. Oh, I think that's what it is there. The Season 5, yeah. It's even hard to tell with any of this, because some of the DLC also doesn't get a lot of sales. But wait, what am I talking about? Yeah, bad practices aside, the actual gameplay itself is pretty much your typical Street Fighter game. So yeah, you'll pick up on it, you'll probably enjoy it, you'll whip some ass. And yeah, and the story's fine for the most part as well. But genuinely, I think in terms of this game at least here, like I don't think the story is as good basically as some of the past ones. But you know what? You can probably just tune it out and enjoy the game. And even then there are other instances where it stupidly gets brutal. Regardless, if you're even halfway decent, the story should take you under 4 hours to get through. So, yeah, I don't know. Just if you really want to have all the content, just research before you buy, because, yeah. Then next up is Gungrave Gore, which, jeez, talk about a step back from the previous games. The way I see Gungrave Gore, it essentially tried to combine the more simplistic gameplay of the original, but with the level design of Overdose. The problem is, neither of these are exactly balanced properly, and what ends up happening is that the game actually ends up dragging on more and more. Yeah, the original was a short game on the whole, but lo and behold, at least that actually worked to its advantage. And Overdose was more like about 6 to 8 hours, depending on how you approached it. Unfortunately, As for the rest of us, though, well, oh, brother, I don't even know where to begin with this. Yeah, like I said, the levels tend to take longer than even some of those in Overdose. And the gameplay itself does tend to get a bit repetitive in parts as well because they're much longer. Initially, they wanted to make an open world statement, but nah, it didn't quite work. Often there's also some difficulty stuff as well, which can come out of nowhere. But genuinely, even as a big fan of the previous two games on the PlayStation 2, I was a bit let down with Gungrave Gore because of some of the bad decision designs. You can get it on a cheap price, sure, but only really if you like the previous two games. I would not count on it otherwise. Well, maybe for a first time it might not be so bad, but I don't know. I was a bit let down with Gungrave Gore. Next up is Dead or Alive 6. Now, Dead or Alive 6, again, really does keep a lot of the gameplay fundamentals from Dead or Alive 5 that still made it a solid fighter on the whole. But the story mode was completely handled all wrong. You see, rather than jumping from section to section like in Dead or Alive 5, you actually have to pick and choose and try and navigate the actual story yourself, which makes it a pain in the ass to follow. And it's like, why are we doing this? Not everything unlocks when as it should, and it's just it makes the story a big pain in the ass sometimes to follow without seeing it in proper chronological order, when this never should have been the case, unlike how it turned out in Street Fighter, excuse me, Dead or Alive 5. And ultimately, even though the gameplay is still solid, it definitely feels like they've tried to dumb it down for beginners, which I don't know why you would now. At the sixth game, excuse me, in the franchise. I mean, I get the tutorial stuff and everything, but shit. I don't know, man. Also, story I guess is fine, but you know what? I hate the way it was presented. I really kind of just, it really could have been presented better. And ultimately, I don't know. With the way Tecmo, or Koei Tecmo, I should say, has treated the franchise, I have no idea what to expect from them anymore with this franchise, nor do I have any idea where they're going to go with it. I just pray they go back to basics here with the previous game, and I wish they would stop with the bad DLC practices, but I kind of doubt that. Alright, and the last game for January that I beat was Cruisin' Blast. Now, when I got a Switch, I knew that this was always one of the games I wanted to get. One, because I'm a big Cruisin' fan. And two, I love arcade racers. And also three, you don't really see many like these nowadays. And it's pretty fine for what it is. It's what you expect from your typical cruising game. And yeah, it pretty much brings the arcade experience faithfully home to your Switch. I have already went and made a video about this, so if you want my full thoughts, go watch my review when you're done here. And yeah, I don't have much more else to say. That covers January. Let's go to February. February started off with quite the hell of a bang in God of War 3. I had already beaten the first two God of Wars closer to the end of 2023, as I had never played them before. And yeah, naturally, with the third one, I figured the best way to go about it was the PlayStation 4 version, the remastered. Unfortunately, there was some hiccups. The disc I had was scratched, so I literally ended up buying a digital just to finish it on stream and getting a proper disc version later. A working disc copy, might I add. I don't get it. Please just take care of your stuff. There's no excuse not to, especially on a game that's likely going to be owned by an adult. Whatever. Eh, this game really, I think, was helping me work through some personal stuff, just hacking and slashing at whatever. And by and large, it pretty much is like the previous two God of Wars. You play as Kratos, hacking and slashing, combo based combat, platforming, and puzzle stuff. And it was one of the last in the Greek mythology line. But overall, I have to say it's very much, I think, my favorite in the entire series, at least of the original trilogy, because quite frankly, it just wrapped up this sort of era of God of War, I think, very efficiently to a T as well. Basically, here, once again, after the betrayal at the hands of Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, whom he learned was his father, and reigniting the Great War, Kratos ascends Mount Olympus until he's abandoned by the Titan Gaia, and guided by Athena's spirit, he battles monsters, gods, and Titans in a search for Pandora, without whom he cannot open Pandora's box, defeat Zeus, and end the reign of the Olympus gods. You know, genuinely, I mean, what even more can I really say about this game? It's honestly just a great game all around, and finally took everything that was great about the previous two games, tightened it up even more, and just put a nice little bow on the original story, and probably up to this point, when it first came out, could have been seen as the greatest in the series. Now, I've not played Ascension, nor have I played any of the Norse era games. I do intend to fix that at some point, especially now that Ragnarok is available on PC. But yeah, if you like the first two and you somehow never played three, please fix that. And if you have played it, but it's been a while, maybe replay it. Next up, this one was another gift, Mortal Kombat 1. Mortal Kombat 1 served as a reboot, the second reboot, if you will, after 2011's Mortal Kombat, which you can no longer play or buy officially on Steam and some other digital storefronts because, yeah, they hate preservation and shit. And because this is the second reboot, they thought, you can forget about this. It's absolutely ridiculous, but what can you do? And yeah, the game pretty much is a whole new timeline following Liu Kang's ending of MK11's Aftermath expansion. And basically, Fire God Liu Kang is trying to assemble a clique of fighters to participate in the latest Mortal Kombat tournament in Outworld while contending with an alliance formed by Shang Tsung. So it's pretty much going back to beat for beat how the original game's story was, but on a more crazier level. There's also a follow-up expansion where Liu Kang and his allies have to contend with Titan Hawk, the Chaos Reigns expansion. I will say, genuinely, the story I do think is better in some instances than MK11's story, which by then completely just went off the rails, and quite frankly, they had no choice but to reboot the damn thing. Unfortunately, though, I feel like it might be somewhat too little too late. I don't know. The gameplay itself is fine, there's really not much to it. But the story modes, well, not so much the actual story, but everything else, like maybe a bit shorter than the average. Plus, on top of that, the microtransaction crap, which what are you going to do? Over milking of DLC, which is pretty much common these days in fighting games. Yeah, it's not a bad game, and I'd say it's better than MK11 on the whole, but I would recommend just waiting for a sale before you take the full plunge into it if you're not the hugest of diehards fans. Oh, who am I kidding? You probably already have it anyways if you are. But yeah, not a bad game entirely, but it's better than MK11, but I'm not sure if I put it in well regards as some of the Mortal Kombats that came before this one. It definitely also feels like a lot of these are trying to go towards a higher route, or better, what I mean is maybe appeal more to me, which maybe in MK might not be so bad, but some other ones, I don't know. But yeah, MK1, it's alright. Continuing with the Sony train of franchises I should have played when they were brand new, Jak and Daxter The Precursor Legacy. This was one of the first Naughty Dog games post Crash trilogy, and one of the first ones on the PlayStation 2. And you can definitely see the game's roots from the previous ones oriented into Jak and Daxter. But whereas Crash Bandicoot was a more linear ordeal, Jak and Daxter The Precursor Legacy tried to make things a bit more open-ended ish, give you a fuller world to navigate with minimal load times and stuff. Basically, Jak has to help his friend Daxter after he gets transformed into an Ottsel. It's a hybrid of an otter and a weasel. And with the help of a master of the mysterious energy known as Eco, Samus the Sage, created by the Precursors Eco, hence, yeah, the Precursor Legacy, The pair endeavor to save the world from the rogue ages Goal and Maya Ackerson, or if Asherson, I cannot pronounce it, Acheron, who plan to flood the world with Dark Eco, which basically is like the reverse Midas touch, and everything it touches turns to hell and then some. Now this game was actually done way even before the PlayStation 2 was officially announced, and the first Naughty Dog game did not be produced by Universal Interactive in 3 years. Jak and Daxter basically has collectathon stuff in it, but it's not overly done to a high degree. The platforming itself is very solid with a variety of abilities that will let you get you to where you need to go. And there's a whole bunch of other different variety of other things. There's some occasional vehicle stuff. There's some other chase stuff as well. And yeah, on the whole, actually, Jak and Daxter, it's a pretty enjoyable game. It still definitely has a lot of beat for beat, like the spin attack, but also some other standard melee stuff as well. And there are some decent boss battles throughout there. Not everything is mandatory, meaning it's not a complete grind fest. And on the whole, it's not hard to see why this was a very beloved platformer that spawned multiple sequels. And I'm still working through Jak 2 as of recording this, but hopefully when I get to the year-end recap for this year, I get to talk about Jak 2. But Jak 1, it's a pretty simple platformer that knows what it wants to do and executes it very well. And finally, to close off the month of February, Pikmin 2. Pikmin 2 took so damn long that, yeah. But Pikmin 2 does not have any of the time-based limitations of getting the best ending like Pikmin 1 did, which is a huge plus. This allows you to take your time and just enjoy the game at your own leisure. Sadly, when it has for that, it basically lacks in any organized neatness or structure because Pikmin 2 is chaotic. Chaotic as hell, even more than the first one. It pretty much follows the same beat for beat where you're collecting all these collectibles here with the Pikmin, but also now there are two other special types of Pikmin as well. Like, the red, yellow, and blue return from the original, but now there's purple and white. White Pikmin are actually faster, and they can resist poisonous gases and poison enemies if devoured, and they can even find hidden treasures buried in the soil. Purple Pikmin are not immune to hazards, and are slower though, but stronger than the others, and can lift as much as 10 ordinary Pikmin. These only really apply, though, in the cave sections. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention there are these cave-like sections now? Yeah, because the previous game wasn't crazy enough. Let's do dungeon crawling stuff. Man, and the caves are also randomly generated, so there's way more you have to manage, way more puzzle solving, but the end goal is only about 10,000 or so. Yeah, because basically what happens is Olimar goes back to his planet, and basically the company he works for is on the verge of bankruptcy, and they've taken his ship. So, Olimar basically has to go back to the planet to find valuable treasure. A lot of this treasure includes things based on products that were in the real world, like you'll see real-life soda cap cans and stuff like that for 7-Up and Dr. Pepper, at least in the GameCube original version. Sadly, the Switch version removes a lot of this due to licensing issues. I'm going to see if I can pull it up really quickly. So yeah, there's a lot of different types. It's treasures. Like the Courage Reactor is a Duracell battery. That's changed to a more generic battery, I guess, in the later re-release. And there's a lot more like that. It's kind of a shame, but what are you going to do? Licensing's a real pain in the ass. Though, not everything is basically based off real world stuff though, so yeah. And beyond that, there were some other differences, text being modified, but I do think Pikmin 2 is a bit better in some instances than the first, but also a bit worse. I don't know. If I can play Pikmin 3 this year, we'll see how I feel. But otherwise, whew, just those two are enough. I'm not even going for the max on Pikmin 2. No, thank you, sir. The base ending is more than enough for me. Again, not a bad game like the first, far from it, but damn is it chaotic. Well, speaking of chaotic, March was a stacked ass month for games for me to beat, so let's get to it. March was a stacked month as I seemingly decided to start taking a bit of a hammer to the section of games in my backlog that are essentially PopCap casual games. And because sometimes every once in a while you need one of those to detox from main games, and it started with Zuma Deluxe. Now, Zuma itself was a nice little simple tile matching game from PopCap that started in 2003 but got released on other stuff. And eventually there was a deluxe version which you can buy on many different platforms as well. And yeah, so it's a very simple game basically. You basically shoot the ball into a matching color ball of the same kind, and when you get 3, it clears a row. And if you can clear chain stuff in a row, like you clear a row of colors, and the next ball that hits on the other one there hits it, you can cause chain, and so on. And basically, you're trying to clear it before it gets into the hole, where basically you're screwed at that point and have to do things over again. It's a very simple but challenging puzzle game. And what can I say other than, yeah, it's crazy, but it's something at least. Honestly, I don't know. I just really kind of wanted to get it through. It's a simple little puzzle game. Not much more to say. Casual ones like this, I guess, tend to help relieve stress when necessary. But otherwise, it is what it is. There's not much to say. And then I decided to tackle Zuma's Revenge. Now, Zuma's Revenge was a straight up sequel, but actually made a lot of good changes as well. High definition graphics, new levels and power ups, new features, and boss battles, with a full on story mode to boot. And the game was also a bit more forgiving in difficulty than in terms of the original Zuma, but with a decent story mode to boot, yeah, you get this one for a cheap price, and it's worth a playthrough or two. But yeah, it keeps a lot of what made the original game good, but adds a lot more to keep players on their toes. And the adventure mode, I love the theming of it as well. And how can I say? It's just fun all around. So yeah, check out the two Zuma games. And if you struggle with the first, you can always modify the INI speed to help get you where you need to go. Because yes, you really want to hack it that much sometimes, but I digress. Oh boy, next up, the mother load. Plumbers don't wear ties. Or more specifically, the so called definitive edition. Which I don't even know how to describe it. Well, I'm pretty sure this game has been talked about to death, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but genuinely, this is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life. This isn't even close to a good game or even a game, yet I find myself very fascinated for some reason, and I always wanted to talk about that definitive edition no matter what. And again, I made a video review about this like I did with Cruise and Blast, so if you want my full thoughts, please go watch it, and judging by how the algorithm received it, I'm guessing not many of you did. But please go and watch it. Genuinely, I really am pretty proud of how the video turned out, and yeah. And I said everything I needed to there, so let's move on to the next game. Doom Eternal. Oh boy. Man, what a game. If you ever wanted a more crazy, hectic version of Doom 2016, with a little bit more open-endedness as to how you get from goal to goal, kind of like a Castlevania Lament of Innocence, well, holy shit, this game is insane. Quite frankly, it is intense. And yeah, you want to feel like a badass slaying demons throughout? Yeah. So what can I say? It's fun here, really. I mean, this game has been talked about to death again, but it's got a kick-ass soundtrack. It's got great gameplay, a good variety of weapons. The gameplay feels smooth as ever, though not huge on some of the other platforming bits in this game. And I know one person described it as sort of like a rhythm-ish kind of game in some instance, which, Yeah, maybe kind of, but I don't really see it that much, nor do I see it that same way or see it as a detriment to the game. If anything, I think it's just very smooth gameplay that happens to flow very, very well, especially if you can master a lot of the other techniques and gadgets and stuff. And yeah, on the whole, Doom Eternal is absolutely worthy of the praise it received. And again, if you haven't played it, please do. I look forward to Doom the Dark Ages, which is going to be a prequel for 2016 and Doom Eternal. And yeah, hopefully I'll get a chance to play that when I do, when it comes out or whenever. And yeah, Doom Eternal rocks. Next up, Peggle Extreme. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the gameplay because all this essentially is like a little demo that you can actually have for free of Peggle. But this was like a crossover piece for when the Orange Box came out. As the Orange Box basically was Half-Life 2, Episode 1, and Episode 2 in the original, as well as Portal and Team Fortress 2. Now, Peggle Extreme takes the default Peggle game and combines it with a bunch of these other uh, levels, if you will, and on the whole, it basically takes the same great goodness and it just lets you play whatever, I guess, here, or get a taste of what to expect for Peggle. So yeah, if you're interested, if you want to try before you buy Peggle, check out Peggle Extreme, especially if you are a fan of like the Valve games that are featured in this. And yeah, which finally leads us into the actual full Peggle Deluxe. Have you ever wanted a Plinko sort of like game as well, but also Pachinko and yeah, and something like that with cute animals and stuff? Well, Peggle might just be the game for you. It's basically was made by PopCap, came out in 2007, and yeah, it's actually a mix of both Pachinko and Bagatelle, which is like a billiards-derived indoor table game where you have to get a number of balls set at 9 in the 19th century past wooden pins. So it's like taking that, but putting it in a more Pachinko-like direction, or even Plinko for us Price is Right fanatics. And you have to shoot a limited supply of balls at a field of colored pegs to clear out the specifically marked pegs while attempting to achieve a high score through skilled shot planning. A lot of powers associated here include a cast of cartoon Peggle Masters, these cute little animals, and you can activate them as well. And when this specifically, Peggle Extreme was included in the orange box here, that's eventually when it really picked out. But Peggle's a pretty straightforward game to follow. It's cute, colorful, fun, and yeah, it's not hard to see why. It's one of PopCap's fun games as well. And I wish we had more of it because, yeah, casual games like this are needed, so yeah. Going on a break from the PopCap train, we have Metroid Prime Remastered for the Switch. And this is another one of those GameCube games that I didn't play back when it was brand new, but when I got my Switch, I knew this is one I should have had like sooner, but even then, I'm glad I played it because unlike Pikmin, which was hectic, despite Metroid Prime still being an action adventure game, it's surprisingly very enjoyable and almost relaxing in some instances. This takes place between the original Metroid and Metroid 2. Once again, you control Samus Aran battling space pirates and biological experiments on Talon 4. Collaboration in between Retro Studios and Nintendo Japanese employees, including, well, Shigeru Miyamoto himself. When he visited the Retro Studios headquarters in Austin, Texas in 2000, he suggested the project. And it's really more of an exploration game rather than a combat game. You're going around hunting for all these upgrades that will let Samus get more abilities, and then you can go around in these other areas here. Use those by using these upgrades to find more and just explore the area. You'll find boss battles and other enemies and take them down, but genuinely, it's not hard to see why. Generally, I think the best thing about Metroid Prime is its atmosphere. Like, just the music is on point. Um, a lot of the levels still look very impressive even to this day. The aesthetics of them all, there's a good variety of them. They fit well within the planet of Talon 4. And in general, it's just, yeah, your ultimate goal is to find the Chozo artifacts to eventually open the path to the Phazon Meteor Impact Crater, which will lead you to the final boss. In general, it's just a very well designed game, and what's said about it has already been said a bunch of times, and I absolutely love it. If you've not played Metroid, just play it. Whether you play it on the original GameCube version, you play the new Play Control version on the Wii and the Trilogy, or you do what I did and you play it on a Switch. That might just be your best bet if you want to play it. So check it out. It's great. I love it. And I hope Metroid Prime 2 and 3 also get ported to the Switch so I can pick those up and play them. Well, at least 3 is cheap enough to get on the Wii. It's 2 that I really want ported. We'll see, with Metroid Prime 4 on the horizon. Back to the PopCap train, we have Peggle Knights. Say, remember that dream-like feeling of Tetris World? Well, if we could illustrate dream feelings in an actual game, I think it would be this here. And keep in mind, while this marketed as the actual follow-up to Peggle, there was an actual Peggle 2, but I don't have that one. Anyway, that's beside the point. Anyways, Peggle Knights pretty much follows where the original Peggle left off. You got all these nice 2D backgrounds with different colored pegs, and the object of the game is the same as before, but there's 60 new levels, additional challenges, a new Peggle Master, Marina the Electric Squid, and an ace score for each level. There wasn't really a lot of hype to the game when it was about to come out, but it was enough well received. And honestly, I really do like the narrative dream elements of it a lot, seeing as how I'm a big sucker for Tetris worlds. So yeah, there's really not much more to say because it's very similar to the first game, other than a different aesthetics. So if you liked Peggle, you will probably like Peggle Knights. Now, we've got a bunch of first-person shooters here before we go back to PopCap, but Battlefront 1, the original Star Wars Battlefront. Yeah, despite me playing this game, being a childhood favorite of me and my cousins growing up, we never really bothered with the campaign because, well, you just fired up instant action and you just screwed around. That's what you did for fun back in the day, and you didn't really care. You just let the time go by. But yeah, Battlefront 1, though, really doesn't have much of a campaign mode to it. But there is a small one, at least, that will let you go from level to take you through each of the game's levels. And again, it's not hard to see why this is such an enjoyable game that is still held up to the test of time. You've got, let's see, I'm trying to think here. This is what I get for doing it unscripted. But you've basically got different classes with different types of weapons and all that good stuff to help you out. You've got all these vehicles you can drive around with as well, turrets, and just, in general, it just really captured. It made you feel like you were in an actual Star Wars battle. And generally, that's pretty much, I think, the main reason this game has still held the test of time, though. Though the single player is not particularly the greatest. It's not a particularly long game either. You can beat it in about, let's see, how long did it take me to beat it according to my Steam time? Uh-oh. Oh, that's the wrong one here. Oops. Yeah, screwed up with that one. I meant to click that. Don't know how I clicked the wrong. Ah, yes, it took me about 3 hours and 9 minutes to beat the single player on a lower difficulty, and the AI is not particularly the strongest, so yeah. Multiplayer was this title's key point. Always was. And thankfully, especially because of Insignia, you can now play the Xbox original version online again. You can probably play the PlayStation 2 version online, but yeah. But yeah, Battlefront 1 still holds up to the test of time. And then next up, here's another series I needed to take a hammer to get out of my backlog that was burning a hole. Quake. Starting with the original Quake. Now, Quake itself was pretty much the next level of evolution of games from id Software and their first-person shooter stuff. Previously, they did Doom indeed, but Quake basically went on full-bore 3D rendering and early support for 3D acceleration through OpenGL. This basically meant now you had a full proper 3D first-person shooter, making it one of the first of its kind, unlike Doom where you were limited still with your field of view, but Quake just brought everything to a whole nother level. It also helped try to refine things a little bit more into eventually what would become more linear driven narrative first person shooters that were especially relentlessly popular in the late 90s. But it still had a lot of elements of Doom in like exploration, secret areas, other things. And it had this very cool, I guess, sort of creepy. I don't know if I want to go full on Lovecraftian like stuff. Yeah, Lovecraftian was involved. A lot of goth fiction and the works of H.P. Lovecraft played serious involvement, and apparently it was originally inspired by a Dungeons and Dragons campaign held amongst the staff of id Software. Really, it's like evolving it up, but at the same time, it's like also crazy, weird, creepy, maybe scary depending on who you are, but yeah. And also I do like the new revision that Night Dive made, as it makes it a bit easier to play on modern systems in many different ways. But yeah, Quake 1 is fine. Then there are the mission packs as well. Scourge of Armageddon and Dissolution of Eternity. Scourge of Armageddon basically takes place after the original game, where the Ranger returns home to find Armageddon has taken over Quake's forces and plans on destroying the Earth using the Rift. So once again, you go back into the dark realms of Quake and defeat the level of armies. And this kind of, I feel like, has sort of the same ordeal. While there are new enemies and weapons and all sorts of other stuff, I do feel like in general that this is kind of the point where things were starting to get into a more where the hell do I go kind of territory. Again, Night Dive's version, which has sort of ways to help find you where to go in case you get lost. Yeah, I guess it helps a bit, but even then, I don't find it as strong as the original game, and even then, I do have my gripes with the original game. It's a decent follow up if you really want more content, but yeah. And then there's Dissolution of Eternity. After the previous expansion, you go back to Earth, but then Quake has initiated yet another dark scheme to subjugate the world by altering the course of time itself. Hero is determined to put an end to Quake once and for all, and therefore boldly enters the Dark Realms for the final confrontation to end the evil once and for all. And once again, there are more new enemies, some new bosses. Not much for There are new weapons with modified ammo as well, like alternate modes, and there's a new device and some other power-ups, but on the whole, I don't know. I think it's the weaker of the two expansion packs, and this is kind of where things tend to get a little more difficult, but there's really not much more I guess I can say about that. You'll probably enjoy the other two expansion packs, maybe a little bit less than the previous one. There was two bonus episodes for the Night Dive release, Dimension of Past and Dimension of the Machine, but those don't have separate entries, and I'd just be repeating territories with those, so let's move on. We're getting close to the end of March, and we gotta close out with some PopCap love, starting with Bejeweled. I technically count this as beaten because, well, the tile matching stuff, you could never really escape it anyways, and it's not like it does have a definitive end, but since I played through it once, I'm counting it as beaten. This was pretty much the definitive Match 3 video game to define all Match 3 video games. Yes, you had ones before it, like Same Game, but Bejeweled genuinely was the one that finally really, I think, shot the genre into a whole nother way and was relentlessly popular, getting ports to a bunch of platforms, especially mobile devices, over 10 million copies sold, downloaded more than 150 million times, and practically launched the entire casual game industry, which pretty much grew to be worth 3 billion within a decade. For better or worse, I'll leave that up to you. So in spite of it, it's a very simple game, a cool aesthetic, easy to pick up gameplay, difficult to master, And if you really wanted to sink a bunch of time into it, you could, but otherwise, don't go too crazy. So, yeah. That's why I'm actually glad Bejeweled 2 exists, because it does have a definitive end, an actual campaign to it. Even if the main full puzzle mode isn't completely like a long game, mind you, it's still a very enjoyable game in its own right. And short for a quick burst here, I beat it in about an hour or so, but genuinely, yeah, a better soundtrack, more to do, even better aesthetics, and yeah, what more can I even say about Bejeweled 2? I liked it even more than I liked Bejeweled 1, so yeah, play it as well if you want one with an actual campaign. Wow, that was a stacked month, and April looks like it's gonna bring some good shit too. Fuck! Seriously? This is how we're starting off April? Oh, God. You know what? No, I'm not even gonna utter this game's name. I've said everything I wanted to say about this game in my review, and then some. So go watch that if you haven't, or when you're done here, or pause this video, go watch that, then come back, or don't, or I don't know anymore. All I know is that after today, I am never going to speak of this game ever again. Fuck this game, let's play something different. How about a little PopCap goodness to help calm us down? Bejeweled 3. Now, Bejeweled 3 actually does try to add more to the previous game by actually upping the difficulty and adding in these quests with these different goals to do. Really, all it boils down to is just a matter of luck, if you can even get through that at that. It's really just, you gotta get lucky sometimes with some of this. Fortunately, I did, and I was able to beat the quest mode, albeit it took me about 8 hours, much more than the length of the previous one. But yeah, if you like the previous game, Bejeweled 2, you'll probably enjoy this one, especially if you want more of a difficult challenge. Next up is Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed. Now, much like the remake of the previous game here, this one takes the original Destroy All Humans 2 and puts it in a brand new way, actually, with a new engine in Unreal Engine 4, better graphics, more quality of life improvements, and in general, you're once again back as Crypto, traveling around the world, England, Japan, Russia, the US, and you're completing missions, defeating human enemies, and yeah, very much so. It's even crazier than the original game as well. And eventually you end up on the moon as well at one point, which is insane. And yeah, by and large, it's very much a lot of what made the original game so good as well. Like, and it's all faithfully done here as well again. In some aspects, I do think it's a bit better than the previous game, but in others, I do think it's worse. Mainly towards the end of the game, the one thing that'll always grind my gears is the final boss, where if you're not leveled up properly, like you haven't done any of the side missions, or not enough of them to level up your best guns, the actual guns that you need to use for that boss, you're going to be shit out of luck and have to grind way more. And it put the game at like almost 14 hours for me to beat, which needless to say, I wasn't happy about, given the fact that the original Destroy All Humans remake was only like 8 hours long or so. And that's just with doing just enough upgrades as well to get by in certain instances. Still, despite this, I do think this is pretty good, and I do look forward to playing the other two Destroy All Humans games. Well, maybe not so much Path of Furon, but Big Willy Unleashed, given that that was one of my convention pickups, and I might even stream it at some point, so we'll see. Next up, oh boy, the motherload of Quake games up to this point. Quake 2. Generally, Quake 2 dropped more of the fantasy elements and went full-on sci-fi Total Recall ordeal, and set the game during humankind's war against a rogue alien race known as the Strogg, and their home planet Strogos is the target of the invasion. And you'll play as a space marine known as Bitterman, who crash lands on the planet, and basically cripples the Strogg and ends their plan to conquer Earth. And pretty much, Quake 2 took a lot of what made the first game so good, but also refined so much of it, making it more
of the standard linear kind of shooter that you would eventually see throughout the 90s. Story driven, linear. Like this, Half-Life and Unreal, I think, changed the way we look at FPS games. And in general, it's not hard to see why. Like, it's straight up like a power fantasy. From the moment you start, like, and you just you're suckered in. Like, it's so fun. I can't even basically describe it other than it's just fun. I beat the whole damn thing in like almost one sitting, but still on the same day, and it took me only like 4 hours. But like, you get hooked and you're suckered in. The soundtrack is also great. It's one of the best soundtracks for any game ever because Sonic Mayhem is awesome. And in general, like, it's just I can't even describe it more than that. Just play Quake 2. It's just amazing. It even got a couple expansions Quake 2 The Reckoning and Quake 2 Ground Zero. Now, the Reckoning mission pack actually follows Joker, who basically goes on to infiltrate the moon base and destroy the Strogg fleet there. And yeah, although I feel like when you get to the mission pack, The Reckoning, it kind of sort of tends to bring back some of the worser puzzle hunting stuff and other things from Quake 1 that I wasn't a huge fan of. But I mean, if you really want more of the same, you can find some good stuff. There's a lot new enemies, some new weapons and power ups, and in general, it's a decent expansion pack, but not quite one of my favorites. And then Ground Zero, Quake 2, which was the other expansion pack from around this time period here. This was like pretty much right after the release of The Reckoning. The Reckoning was done by Zactrix Entertainment, and Ground Zero was done by Rogue Entertainment. One of the Marines who managed to land on the gravity well that has tripped the Earth fleet in orbit above the planet has to make his way to the gravity well and destroy the fleet above it and disable the entire Defense Force planet. Again, it pretty much follows in the same vein as the other expansion packs, so I'm not huge as into it. There's a lot, again, new enemies, bosses, weapons, power ups. There are some other gameplay changes, though, like some AI improvements as well. So there is much more difficult. It's probably the difficult stuff here, like the most difficult of this line of Quake stuff, and you can actually apply these changes in the base game, the original Quake 2 single player campaign, and you can just, yeah. But there are some glitches with it though, but yeah. Fine, but I think it's my least favorite of the two. There's also Quake 2 64, which is basically a port of the N64 version of Quake 2, which has its own unique differences. And then Call of the Machine was the last expansion made solely for this Night Dive remaster. But yeah, in general, just play all of Quake 2. It's fun. And so is Quake 3 Arena for that matter. But this one went more in a arena shooter direction. In general, this was around the same time Unreal Tournament came out, so to be fair, I think also id Software wanted their own piece to compete with Epic Games, although they came out so close to each other, but Unreal had the edge first. Though I will say, Quake 3 Arena is still pretty good. It takes a lot of the best shooting stuff of the other Quake games, but puts it in a more multiplayer setting. Sonic Mayhem comes back with some more kick ass music, and Frontline Assembly founder Bill Leeb collabs with him for some good stuff. And in general, even though it's a bit of a pain in the butt to get running on modern systems properly, it's still a very fun game on the whole. And yeah, you like arena shooters or you want to try them, this is a good starting point. Though I personally prefer Unreal Tournament because of its aesthetics, music, lore, and everything, but you can't even buy that one anymore. So yeah, don your puffy shirts. So yeah, also I did try Team Arena, but that really doesn't have a single player component, so I just put it in the multiplayer only category. So yeah. And finally, to close off this Quake Palooza, Quake 4. Yeah. Now this was actually the first one I ever played because it ran on the same engine as Doom 3, which I fell in love with. And though that Though this Quake 4 was made by Raven Software. That said, they still supervised the development of the game, though, but they just collaborated with Raven and the id Tech 4 engine. This game goes back to the single player roots seen in Quake 2 and is pretty much a direct sequel to that game's story mode. And it also brings back a lot of some of the other horror stuff. Not quite in the same way as Quake 1, but it has its own flair on it. And in general, it's a very, very crazy game. But that said, if you never played it or any of the Quake games, I really do suggest doing so. Like, you can, though, see some of the more Doom-like elements in Quake 4, at least Doom 3-ish, but yeah. Play all of Quake if you haven't. It's a great series, and somebody please save enemy territories, much like Wolfenstein 2009. And yeah, all of that runs on id Tech 4, so yeah, and Wolfenstein '09 was a Ravensoft, so yeah. Or I'm just gonna have to do like I did with No One Lives Forever. Oh well, what can you do? Next. And closer to the end of spring, starting of summer here, oh my, the fun begins, and boy do I have some games to get us in that mood. Well, maybe not quite, but at least a couple. Starting with Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories. Now, Vice City Stories is one that always piqued my interest. A little bit of my history with this. I first became aware of it when there was a mod for the PC version of San Andreas that was basically porting the game into the San Andreas engine so people could play it on PC. Alas, that version never actually managed to came out to be finished. And unfortunately, Vice City Stories was never ported to any other console whatsoever. And this became kind of a pain when the GTA Trilogy, the Definitive Edition, came out. Oh, excuse me, Definitive. I'm using Dr. Evil air quotes even though you can't see it. When that came out, the price of Vice City Stories basically went up quite a bit. And well, actually, wait, who am I kidding? The pandemic already started with another random spike on this one for no reason, even though, and now it's sitting in like the $60 range. I got mine for less than that, thankfully, when I found it at a local shop. However, it did take me a while to get around to actually beating it. I've played it on and off a bit, but it was 2024 when I evocably decided, okay, this is going to be the year I finish Vice City Stories. And you wouldn't even believe the fucking catalyst for this. It was the goddamn Knuckles miniseries here in the Sonic universe. Okay, bit of an explanation here for that. Because the opening scene in that series is literally set to Scandals the Warrior, which is also featured on the soundtrack for Vice City Stories. And I'm like, oh crap, this is a sign I need to finish it. So I battened down the hatches and I went and beat it, and it's a fine game, but generally, I'm not sure it's worth paying for the expensive prices it is now. I got mine for an okay-ish price, but I don't know really. Especially it's only the PlayStation 2 version, because that was never ported here, like anywhere else. It was supposed to on PlayStation 4 digitally, but that version got canceled. Vice City Stories is actually a prequel to the original Vice Cities and follows the exploits of Victor Vance, Vic Vance, who was a minor character originally featured in the original Vice City. And yeah, the story basically centers around his attempt to build up a criminal empire alongside his brother Lance, who of course became a major character in the original Vice City. And with the initial intention of raising money for his sick brother's Pete's medication, he comes into conflict with rival gangs, drug lords, and other enemies. Well, in addition to all the traditional gameplay elements and side missions of the series, there's a unique empire building system where you need to expand your criminal syndicate from the ground up by taking over businesses from rival organizations and doing missions for each of them to increase their income and unlock rewards. Much like, almost like the gang warfare stuff in San Andreas, but not quite the same thing as well. And in general, I think Vice City Stories, I've always loved the theming of Vice City, but damn, are there still a lot of growing pains in this one. I think if you go back and actually try to play any of the original GTA games on original hardware, you're going to have a tough time. Like, because the lack of checkpoints and other systems, and it really shows you how relentless some of this was. And part of it being the reason why freaking, well, Codebreaker and Action Replay Max were invented, or never mind the fact that in that one mission where Lance's car basically gets blown up and you have to take a crummy motorcycle here to chase down in a terrible chase mission, he reacts worse than friggin' Joey from Full House after his car gets driven through the kitchen by Stephanie Tanner. But yeah, beyond that, Vice City Stories pretty much follows a lot of the same thing in Vice City. And you can actually swim, unlike in the original Vice City. In general, it's a very enjoyable game on the whole, really. And yeah, but there are some growing pains to it. I think you definitely will be better off emulating this one, but I always wanted a physical because I do have Liberty City Stories, so owning this one was kind of essential for me. And yeah, it's a very enjoyable game for the most part, but it's not without its faults. Then, Like a Dragon Ishin. Now, this is a remake of, well, the original Ryuga Godeko Ishin, or Yakuza Ishin, if you will, at the time. Now, this game was originally a Japanese exclusive for the PS3 and PS4, much like Kenzan, which came before it on the PlayStation 3, which took many of the Yakuza characters and put them in ancient times, basically. Although it definitely changed up quite a bit of different things as well. Ishin in general was the remake that ran on Unreal Engine 4, and this was actually, they were inspired to bring this game over to the West because of the success of Ghost of Tsushima, which had a similar setting. It's kind of sad that they just didn't use the Dragon engine because that would have just been easier instead of doing Unreal Engine 4 because it has its own hiccups. But yeah, it's very much most of the gameplay from the original system, with the exception of trooper cards, and they can be used in regular combat, or heck, just leave the engine unchanged from Yakuza 0. Shit, in fact, you'll find many characters from 0, 6, and Like a Dragon there, at least their faces. The audio is only available in Japanese, but it is what it is. You've still got karaoke and everything. You go around doing missions for other characters to advance the story. Side quests. There's different types of combat because you're a samurai, so you've got sword. You can actually use a gun, which they genuinely did use. And you can also do a whole bunch of other stuff. And in general, I think it's a very good game. It really is here. Like, I don't know if it's quite up there with the other ones, and maybe one day we'll get Kenzan and just translate that. I wish Dead Souls would get ported over because that's been trapped on the PlayStation 3, and sadly, it's another one that's price has gone up and has showed no signs of slowing down, so I may just have to emulate that one. Unless, God forbid. Let me go to Imsve on Ayler, if I can even speak it in Pig Latin, right? Arkshay on Ite. Ugh. Arkshay Ite. I don't know. Dead Souls. And of course, Sega fucking steals. You know what? Yeah, fucking assholes basically copyright claim the shit, even though you can't legitimately buy it. And I'm not paying a fucking scalper anymore a certain money, unless I can bring the price down. But I have to hope it shows up at my local trade shop. Sorry. Play Like a Dragon Ishin. Oh boy. Trying to get into a summer mood, but Mario Sunshine. I wanted 3D All Stars on the Switch. I got it because it has Sunshine, which I never had on the GameCube. It had 64, which, I mean, it had to, and Galaxy, which is still easy to get, but again, Switch will be the better version. Yeah, you know what, though? Despite all that, I, uh, I was disappointed by Mario Sunshine. Don't get me wrong. I love the graphics. I love the aesthetics. I love the music. I do, okay? Now give me a minute here to recompose my thoughts. Now, where were we? Oh, yeah. This game. Shoot. So, unlike Mario 64, which itself was a pretty straightforward, platformer for the most part, Sunshine tried to add something a little bit different with the addition of Flood as a mechanic. And Flood stands for Flash Liquidizer using Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dousing Device. This water cannon was created by Professor Egad, who of course created that vacuum that Luigi uses in Luigi's Mansion. And basically, you have to use the friggin', Flood to clean up the area. I don't really have a problem with this mechanic, as I think Flood is an interesting mechanic here, and definitely adds something different from Mario 64. My problem with the game is that it's way too slippery for its own nature. Like, if you actually try to play this on a Switch with a normal Pro controller versus playing it with an actual GameCube controller, if you have a device that will let you use a GameCube controller on a Switch, I think basically you're going to realize that this game really was developed in mind with the GameCube controller specifically, because anything else, no, it really just doesn't feel good. And even then, it's still tough as hell in some other instances. Like, the worst parts, I think, undoubtedly, are the levels where you don't have Flood and you have to do standard platforming stuff. Unfortunately, there really aren't much checkpoints in these areas, and that leads me into the other problem, the game's camera. You don't always have the best angle, and it feels like you have to fight with the camera. There's even times where you'll actively push against it in one way, but it will go a different way. Ultimately, it just... I just don't like it. It caused way more frustration than fun. And that's really it. I just found myself more frustrated with this game than fun. Also, on top of that, you think you can just collect the minimum amount of shine sprites you need to get through the boss. No, 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 no. Or to get to the final boss section. No, 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 no. You have to collect the specific ones by completing each of the damn levels. And honestly, I'm not a fan of that. Unlike in Mario 64, at least from what I've heard, where you can do what you have to do. Yeah, this is actually the first 3D Mario game I've played proper, but I've researched enough. And ultimately, I found myself very frustrated with this game. Very disappointed, especially the fact given that this is critically acclaimed with a 92 on Metacritic by most critics, and probably regarded as a must-play. If I could just actually pull up Metacritic GameCube stuff, you could actually see what the deal is here. Yeah, ranked at a 92, which puts it in the top 15 games for the GameCube, and yet I found myself disappointed with it. I don't know, I just found it a little overrated. I wanted to like it more, but I just couldn't. And I'm very sad about that. But the next game, thankfully, I actually really enjoyed, Shadow Warrior 3. Now, Shadow Warrior 3, as a whole, was a direct sequel to Shadow Warrior 2, but did away with a lot of the bad crap, basically, that I did not like in that game. Mainly how they tried to make it more like Borderlands. Here, they said screw that, went back to basics, and made it more like Shadow Warrior 1. Now, granted, you still had quite a bit more platforming and other stuff, but still, on the whole, and some Doom Eternal-like stuff going on, with a lot of the arena-like fights against the large hordes of enemies, but on the whole, Shadow Warrior 3 I found to be much more enjoyable than Shadow Warrior 2 because of these changes. On top of that, I almost 100%ed the game, which actually helps quite a bit. But ultimately, yeah, maybe I'll go back and 100% it if I'm really bored one day. It's just finding the orbs and where to go through for the upgrades. But for the most part, yeah. It looks great, it plays great, and genuinely, yeah. I definitely do think Shadow Warrior 3 is probably the best out of this modern trilogy. I have no idea what Flying Wild Hog's going to do next with the series, but hopefully they keep more of this up and we'll be in for a fun time. And finally, last but not least, it's Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. With this port finally making its way onto PC, I finally went and sat down and actually played this game. And Uncharted 4 definitely goes even more crazier than a lot of the past games in the series, but on the whole, though, not to say that it already didn't, but it's very much of the same. It does feel like a good closing point as well for Nathan Drake, and I think it wraps up his story very nice and very efficiently. And on the whole, this was before Neil Druckmann, how do I put this nicely? Decided to pull a Rian Johnson with The Last of Us 2. But, on the whole, even then with the story, it's like, I mean, it kind of sucks because Amy Hennig and Justin Richmond, the original creative director and game director, were at the helm, but they departed from Naughty Dog. That led to them being replaced by Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley. And you know what? I mean, it's an enjoyable game here. If you like the past ones, you will here. There's still a lot of crazy shit that happens, but if you've played even one of these games, you are definitely most used to that by now because, yeah, you just are, okay? It's Uncharted. You puzzle hunt, you do what you do, and anything I said about it, yeah. I do like a lot of the crazy set pieces, like the chase sequence eventually here, like where Sam is basically holding on to the freaking Jeep by a rope, and there's like all this other stuff. Yeah, I don't know where I'd rank this overall on the whole, but Uncharted 4 Thieves' End was a very nice end and a fitting conclusion to Nathan Drake's story. June, 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 the month of summer. Summer officially begins, and the fun really, yeah, equally matches with some of these games. Starting with the ever reliable Star Wars Battlefront 2. Yeah, again, like Battlefront 1, I never played the campaign for this one way back in the day. Because, well, again, me and my cousins, we just fired up Instant Action and had a hell of a time as you did, especially due to the fact that Battlefront 2 now allows you to play as Jedi and Sith, which basically changed the whole game in a way as well. And it was just so much fun. Though I will say, Battlefront 2 does have more of a campaign than the previous game here, actually retelling portions of the Star Wars story from point of view of a veteran clone Imperial stormtrooper who reminisces about his tour of duty in both of the in service of the Galactic Republic and the Empire. And then with also Hero Assault, which allows you to do actual just full on Jedi versus Sith deathmatch stuff and objective space battles. Beyond that, Battlefront 2 pretty much kept everything the same as it did, which, yeah. I mean, is it really much of a surprise? I mean, I don't even think I need to say more about this game. This game is legend. Wait for it. And I hope you're not lactose intolerant because the next part of this word is dairy. I mean, heck, they eventually brought back the multiplayer for it on PC. And shit, I'm pretty sure you can even play the console versions online. And especially the original Xbox version thanks to Insignia. Just do yourself a favor. Do not bother with the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. Just don't. Like, it's not a good version to play. The only reason you'd even want it is if you cannot play the original Battlefront games. Like, say you don't have a PlayStation 2 or Xbox or 360 or an Xbox One and on as a way to play them there. Or if you only have those and you want to play multiplayer, because sadly you do need original stuff for multiplayer. And again, even though you can still easily buy these on Steam, I mean, look at this. It's $10 for both of them. That's $20. The Battlefront Classic Collection, which did not have a good launch by the way, is like $35. Genuinely, I wouldn't bother with it unless you don't have other ways to play the original Battlefront. I mean, it's right there. Why would, and especially because the multiplayer is back for them on PC and has been for years. So I don't know, man. It's very weird, but just stick with the original Battlefront games and you'll be fine. And definitely stay away from anything EA related. They grind my gears, you know. Okay, now where are we? Next up, Dead or Alive Extreme 3 Scarlet. I made a good review about this. My review summed up all my thoughts pretty well. And again, this is another one that I had to get on the Switch. So, Actually, it might be my only imported game as of now, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, check out Dead or Alive Extreme 3 if you like the other two. Watch my review for further information. That's all I have to say. Now, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, which allowed me to finish the Legacy of Thieves collection. Now, while Uncharted 4 was a solid ending on the whole for Nathan Drake, Lost Legacy is a, I guess, decent, if you will, post epilogue that also gives some closure to, like, Chloe Fraser, who is a fan favorite, and puts her working with ex mercenary Nadine Ross, who was introduced in the fourth game, and a bit of an adversary. In general, it's very much like a lesser version of the other Uncharted games. There's not as much meat on the bone because this was just an expansion and you can beat it in like 6 hours. But for what it's worth, it still does keep a lot of what made the other games good, but it's not quite to the same epic, crazy, grand degree. There's definitely a lot more exploring as well and other stuff. Well, I mean, there already was in the previous games, let's be honest, but here especially, I think it's way more obvious and on the nose. It's just more open ended in general. Though, I am very happy that Chloe Fraser does get the spotlight because I've always liked the character. Also, because I'm a huge Claudia Black fan, thanks to stuff like Farscape and, well, Pitch Black, and, well, of course, this one here. Yeah. So, yeah, I really do like Uncharted. I did like The Lost Legacy. It's probably the lowest of the bunch, though, on the totem pole, but that does not make it a bad game. Far from it. It's still a very good game, and if you like the other Uncharted, you will definitely enjoy this one. I don't know where Sony's going to take the franchise next, but somebody keep Neil Druckmann's grubby paws off it, please. I do not want a repeat of TLOU 2. Or maybe we don't. Maybe we just let it be and just let it be because not everything needs a sequel, you know? Just some food for thought. And to close out June, we've got Doom 64. Now, Doom 64 for the longest time was not available on PC, but thanks to Night Dive again, they remastered the game and brought it to PC around the time Doom Eternal came out. In fact, I do believe this was originally a pre order bonus, but eventually you could buy it separately for like $5. On the whole, Doom 64 is very much in vein with the other Doom games, but it's a lot more difficult in some instances too. And it's just, I don't know. I like it, but I think I do prefer the original Dooms over this. And it can take a good while. 6 hours can feel much longer when you're trying to hunt down and find out where the hell you even need to go. So, I don't know. Ultimately, though, it is a more like a novelty thing, but I will say it's a pretty interesting one at that, and the fact that it even made its way to the N64 in the first place is astounding, but yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you want a good Doom-like game, and other times you want a Quake 2, but still, this is not a bad game. I liked it, but not as much as some of the other Dooms. Oh boy, we are stacked thanks to Miss July, starting with Limbo. Now, Limbo is one of those games that always stood out to me when I first learned about it back in the day via Xbox Live. And eventually, when it found its way to PC, I eventually got it for free, but I just sat on it, really, not bothering to play it until I thought, well, this is a short game. Why don't I try and knock this off and see what happens? And, oh boy, that is an experience. Basically, you're guiding this unnamed boy through all these environments and traps as you search for his sister. There's a lot of puzzles expecting you to fail before you find the correct solution. It's basically trial and error, or trial and death, as the developer Playdead called it. And there's a lot of nightmare stuff here in this inducing game as well. Like, it actually gets very scary, which I kind of wasn't expecting. And it has this whole black and white tones, a lot of lighting and film grain effects, and minimal ambient sounds to help. Like if this game could actually have a proper Atmos track to it, I think that would just go insane with it. Like it could really elevate it. And this is one of those that people try to say video games is an art form as an example of. And I definitely agree, though. But it's definitely not for everyone because of the nature of the gameplay. You're going to fail. You're probably going to get frustrated unless you just decide to use a guide or whatever. But if you can master it, it's actually not a long game to go through or like speed run. It was a pretty big deal when it came out in 2010 on Xbox Live Arcade, and over the years it still does. And the next game, Inside, as well, has many of the same elements as Limbo. I haven't played it. I may one day. I'm not really sure. We'll see what happens. But alas, I've got to get back to the next game here. We Love Katamari plus Royal Reviry. I cannot pronounce that last word. It's like revive, but it's not. So, We Love Katamari in general. Now, unlike the original Katamari Reroll, which I actually did not play on the PlayStation 2, this one I actually did, and this was actually the first Katamari game I ever played because it was never ported, but I found it eventually and ended up playing it. And yeah, basically, it puts you in control of the prince once again, and using the titular Katamari to basically um, just collect objects, and then essentially you can collect larger objects. It's very fucking weird, but then again, Japan makes weird games, like I said. And basically, the original creator of the game, Keita Takahashi, was opposed to the idea of a sequel as he felt that was detrimental to employee creativity. But he agreed to do it when Namco basically said, hey, we're going to do this with or without you. So the game got a larger budget and a bigger staff to work on as well. In short, 30 employees worked to create it. And it's basically was themed around fan service, not pervy fan service, but rather fan service that's basically people supporting the original Katamari Damacy when it came out. And it still retained the spirit of the original, but it was also fresh by approaching it from a different direction. I guess, kind of, sort of, like, less. It's like if Spinal Tap wasn't a mockumentary, I guess, if you will. In spite of that, it's a pretty solid game here, and ultimately, this re-release here, We Love Katamari Reroll plus Royal Reviry, was a remaster that came out on the Switch, PS4 and 5, PC, Xbox One, and Series X/S. There's high definition resolutions and other quality of improvement lives. Yeah, Katamari is very addictive to try to beat your score on, especially 100%ing stuff and whatever, and it's a wild, wild game, but if you never played the original, I mean, you could probably jump into this one fine, but I do think playing the original will probably help flesh out the plot a bit more. Not so much from a gameplay standpoint as well. But yeah, I would definitely say give this a play through. Play through both Katamaris. I need to get through the other ones actually as well, because there's Beautiful Katamari on the 360, and then there's Katamari Forever on the PS3. Yeah, it'd be nice if Namco made a new entry here. Like, but until then, this is what we have, and it's alright. Oh, PopCap, you're always there when I need you to let off some stress on a nice little calm casual game. And a simple one like Feeding Frenzy 2. Okay, well, they didn't develop it. It was Sprout Games who developed it, but PopCap did publish it, to be fair, so it's still under their realm. And it was included in a retail PS3 versions with Bejeweled 3 along with Zuma. But Feeding Frenzy 2 is very much similar to the original Feeding Frenzy. You basically have to control several fast-growing marine predators out to uncover a mystery lurking in the ocean. The game aims to avoid predators and obstacles while eating other smaller fish, eventually reaching the top of the food chain. There are 60 new levels which have a whole bunch of new underwater scenery, get coral reefs, deep-sea caves, sunken ships, and some challenges. Basically, you play as a butterfly fish named Boris? Wait, that's his name? Boris? I never I don't remember. I mean, I just turned it on when I wanted a simple, easy game to play, and it's very simple here to play. And eventually, by the time you get through it, you're like, hey, it's done. And eventually, you have to stop the intruder, and that's it. Not a particularly long game. Again, you can beat it in like 3.5 hours, but again, I don't really expect a heck of a whole lot from these games. But Feeding Frenzy 2, gobble fish, get bigger, gobble bigger fish, it's fun. Now, here's a series that I've wanted to try for the longest time possible due to Hideo Kojima's involvement that I finally was able to, thanks to finally picking up the HD collection and having the sequel sitting in my backlog forever. Zone of the Enders. Now, this was originally a PlayStation 2 game that later got a PlayStation 3 and 360 release through the HD collection. It's a very strange game. It's a hack and slash, also third person shooter, in which you play as this guy named Leo, who becomes the pilot of, well, this mech of sorts here. Here. Well, they're technically known as orbital frames here. And basically, he finds Jehuti. That's the name of the frame itself. And ultimately, he has to return it to the Space Force. Yeah, right, yeah. And he uses the frame to protect the civilians. It has a more serious and realistic focus on the mecha genre, too. And a lot of the designs were actually done by Yoji Shinakawa, the character and mechanical designer for the Metal Gear series, which of course is Kojima's baby. In general, you'll travel around different areas, completing missions, beating bosses, and sometimes you have to be mindful of the damage around nearby buildings and civilians, which basically makes you play more strategically and not just recklessly destroying everything in sight. It's more strategic, and you're given a ranking depending on how many buildings and civilians were destroyed or spared. And it does actually affect the ending sequence outcome, apparently. Or so I thought? I don't know. I didn't see much of a difference here when I looked with some of this, so yeah. Or maybe I just got lucky. I don't know. Either way, Zone of the Enders definitely has a lot of emphasis on melee combat in addition to shooting. There are some other elements that are definitely a bit more rougher here than others, but on the whole, it doesn't overstay its welcome despite some of these flaws. And on the whole, it's a pretty interesting little game that's worth at least one playthrough, I think. Yeah, and also you'll level up Jehuti as well, so yeah. Now, Zone of the Enders, the second runner, I don't know. I feel like this one dragged ass more and was more difficult in the end compared to what came before it. And it sucks because, well, there's a lot to like about it. It's a slightly different plot with a different character who actually, while Leo does appear in this game, you instead play as now Dingo, who basically inadvertently discovers Jehuti, and now he basically takes control of it and is now forced to basically try to take this Jehuti back. Yeah, and ultimately, he's actually bound to the machine, Dingo, and yeah, because he was forced to have his life saved like this. Actually, there was a new director in Shuyo Murata, unlike um, Noriaki Okamura, but Kojima still remained a producer to provide a different experience, though, or rather, Kojima appointed him. And they try to basically fix more of the elements by having more action elements. Yet playing it on a higher difficulty was a bit more unforgiving, or even on a lower one. There's definitely some changes in this one compared to the original game. And what can I say other than, yeah. Let's see. I don't even know what else really to say about it here. Like, it's more linear, though, which I do appreciate that to a degree. And you can even fully repair Jehuti and save your progress at the beginning of each stage, and you still level up. And there are rankings still, but in general, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's just some more tougher on the whole and more brutal than the original. So your mileage may kind of vary. I think it just has more of a curve to it and it just drags on a little more. So, eh, I don't know. For what it is, I guess it's not bad, but I don't know if I quite prefer it over the original to some degree. Oh boy, now here's one I wanted to do inevitably after a chance encounter at a convention, where I happened to find the Ace Attorney cosplay group and got a picture with a Phoenix Wright cosplayer while I was dressed up as, what's his name from Judgment? Yagami from the game Judgment, while doing the objection pose. Because there's an Easter egg in that game, in the original, that references Ace Attorney. But yeah, nah. The original Ace Attorney was always one I've been fascinated with. However, I never quite fully beat it, despite having it on the Wii. When I got this collection, it gave me the other two as well, which I did not buy on the WiiWare shop before it shut down. And I can technically put them back on, but I really don't feel like it. So, yeah, there's really not much more I can say. There's a lot of detective work in this game, which I'm not the best at. I'm going to be honest, I've always been more of a lore fan of Ace Attorney than I was an actual gameplay. I acknowledge there is. Maybe I'm just not the best with this type of gameplay itself. That said, I still appreciate everything else about it. The story, the characters, which I was already hooked to some of this even before, and you know what? It's pretty enjoyable on the whole. Yeah, I am still working my way. I completed the first case of Justice for All, but I'm going to try to finish it and the third game hopefully this year, but we'll see. Also, Phoenix Wright X my FA for life. Don't fight me on that one. Don't at me. Now, Bookworm Deluxe. This is like the original Bejeweled, where there's not really much of a campaign to it, but you can, in theory, just play through it once and count it, so I kind of have to on a technicality. Bookworm is more of a worm finding game, or a word finding game. You just keep finding words to go through and eventually get the highest score. And the deluxe version has some updated graphics and some other stuff, which, yeah. Now, I would have actually played through Bookworm Adventures because that one actually has a campaign to it. But you can't even buy that one on Steam anymore. Shit, you can't even buy the original. Like, it doesn't even make sense. Both of them were removed from Steam and even Origin in 2016, which makes it impossible to purchase legally via digital download. Like, yeah, I want to play Adventures. I know there's other ways to do it. I feel like Bookworm could be expanded more with an actual, you know what, campaign, but I'll have to hunt it out one day, assuming I clear off my other backlog. Next game we have, oh yes, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Alright, big explanation as to why I even wanted to play this game. You see, not long ago, G-Man Lives made a little video about this game, and that video, let's see if I can find it, was done about almost a whole year ago, like even before the movie Deadpool and Wolverine came out. Oh shit, it was last year now. It will be. But yeah, that piqued my interest in wanting to play the game itself because Deadpool and Wolverine was coming out, and I always heard that this was regarded as not just one of the better video game movies, like, or games based on a video game, one of the best games based on a movie. I can't speak. X-Men Origins Wolverine is one of the best video game or film to game adaptations there. And unfortunately, finding a physical copy, they went up for some unbridled reason because Activision lost their license, and especially when the movie came out, they were going for stupid amounts of money. And the PlayStation 3 version is still up there, like, for some stinking reason. Did that one ever go? Yep, it went over $100 because of reasons. And really, it's the Uncaged edition that you want to play because that was made by Raven Software. And by and large, this game absolutely was worthy. You could just tear through people like no tomorrow. You have all these abilities. It's easy to pick up. It's stupidly fun. and it's earned its reputation as one of the best games based on a movie. Shit, it's actually better than the actual X-Men Origins Wolverine film itself. Unfortunately, you cannot get this game legally, and you have to pay 60 to 80 bucks for a complete physical copy. Or you can do what I did, go on an Abandonware website and get the PC version, which is also patched to work on this as well. And yeah, it's kind of a shame because Activision lost their license with Marvel, which means this game got delisted, which sucks because it's fun. And it was the final Wolverine game published by Activision before the license expired. And this was actually the last Wolverine game until the announcement of Insomniac's Marvel's Wolverine. So, I have no idea exactly what to expect out of that game. It's probably going to be more open world and have a lot of elements from their Spider-Man games. But I mean, it'll still probably be good, but oh man, this was like a whole other level of fun. But yeah, even if you have to go on an Abandonware website and install it on your PC to play it, just play it. It's fun. Next up, PlayStation All Stars Battle Royale. This game was Sony's answer to Nintendo's Super Smash Bros. Series. And it was one of the first cross-buy games, which means if you purchased the PS3 version, you could get a free copy of the Vita port. Ultimately, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale featured a mix of great characters from previous Sony IPs legitimately, including but not limited to Infamous, Killzone, Starhawk. Oh, I want to play that one, but emulation sucks. Whatever. Bat Princess, Jack and Daxter, God of War, even Uncharted, Parappa the Rapper, Ratchet and Clank, Little Big Planet, Medieval, Sly Cooper, even ones that have been left to time like Heavenly Sword and Ape Escape and Twisted Metal, even some obscure ones like Doko Demo Isio, which had very little releases outside of Japan. And even other franchises, though, that were known on PlayStation at other points, but eventually went multi-platform, such as, say, Metal Gear, which has Raiden featured as a playable character, Heihachi, young Heihachi in his Tekken form, young Heihachi, yeah, Tekken and all. And then there's just other ones that are straight up third party in here, though, like Big Daddy from Bioshock, Dante with his bad DMC Devil May Cry form. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is at the end of the day. Ultimately, I will say this about the game, though. It's fun, but you have to play it in doses, like, or you'll tire yourself out. And eventually, things kind of did get a little repetitive trying to go 100%, so I just decided to ice it for now. I may come back and try to beat the other story modes later, but alas, I'm kind of drained from it anyways. It's not a bad game, but yeah, be mindful with it though. Still, pretty fun on the whole. And finally, the last one to close out July is Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat was sort of a very interesting platformer when it first came out. This was actually one that was straight up compatible primarily for the DK bongos. While you could use a regular controller, they really intended you to play this with the bongos. And it was very insane as well. Miyamoto was the one who actually suggested that Nintendo should commission a new Donkey Kong game. And ultimately, this was a pretty interesting ordeal. However, on the WiiWare, not the WiiWare, the original Wii, you didn't really have that option. Well, I mean, they could have, but nah. And the new Play Control variant basically used the Wii Remote and Nunchuck combo as a way of simulating the bongos. And I'll say this straight up, you're going to get quite a hell of an arm workout with this game if you play it on the Wii version. Especially. But yeah, you have to know how to clap properly, which is just slamming, not slamming, but using both the Wii Remote and Nunchuck at the same time or whatever here, or in general. And in general, it's a very crazy game. It's like a lesser version of Donkey Kong Country, where you go through all these campaigns and stuff, and you've got score attack elements as well. Get as many beats as possible by grabbing bananas. And really, it just encourages you to master the proper flow of it, though. and it's very much worth it. And at the end, you can finally beat the boss and then earn a crest to get more beats, or rather, new kingdoms. And in general, it's a very bizarre game. I can't even begin to describe it. You should definitely play it for yourself, regardless of if you do it with the bongos or the Wii version. But keep in mind, the Wii version does have some differences in some of the design levels to accommodate for the changes. So, yeah. That's going to close off July. Let's go to August. Well, August was a very peculiar short month. Yeah, but I did beat two big ones and a backlog of stuff I picked up on the sales from Steam. Starting with No More Heroes. No More Heroes was always one of those games I wanted to try for the longest time possible. It was just one of the coolest things that looked like Suda51 had ever put on an actual screen. And basically, you play as Travis Touchdown, who wins a beam katana in an auction and essentially becomes involved in the United Assassins Association and has to force to kill assassins higher in rank to prevent others from targeting him as he climbs to rank number 1. You'll basically roam around, you'll go around on his motorcycle, and what you'll do here is that you will basically do these part-time job side quests to earn money to spend on weapons, training sessions, clothes, and videotapes. Well, mostly weapons and training sessions and upgrades for said weapon. But really, you'll have to earn the money to compete in these ranking fights. Then when you do, you can just go around, slash guys, decapitate them, split them in half, and every other nasty thing you can do to them with this beam katana, actually emulating how it should be done. You can even actually do wrestling maneuvers as well, which is pretty cool. But ultimately, it's a very interesting game. But I do think the last fight with Gene goes way overboard, and you really just have to be fully upgraded and time everything properly just to avoid this insanity, because quite frankly, it's pretty screwed up. That said, though, it's definitely a pretty good game, No More Heroes, and it's worth playing through, and I did manage to 100% it. So naturally, I went and played No More Heroes 2 Desperate Struggle. Desperate Struggle was actually the only game in the series without the involvement of Suda51. He was only, at least as a lead director, I mean, he was mostly only executive director, my mistake, and Nobutaka Ichiki replaced him. This game is actually very much considered to be superior to its predecessor, and it's not hard to see why. For starters, a lot of the forcing to earn money for ranking fights crap from the first game is gone. The site, which allows you to focus more on upgrades and other stuff. The side quests here, if you want to earn money for other objects and stuff, have been redone with these 8-bit style themes, and really, again, it's not hard to see why here. It's very fun indeed here, seeing that. And the flow of the combat itself is very much improved over the first game. It's a lot more smoother. Though I do wish that the game would also allow you to be able to switch weapons on the fly freely, much like Devil May Cry with its style switcher. I think that one change alone would have really just put the cherry on top this game. But it's a minor complaint in the end, really. And ultimately, No More Heroes 2 is a really rock-solid game on the whole. It has a great story as well, and it's fun. But the PC port is kind of bad. I suffered one crash after one particular boss battle. And also, there are some sadly, there are some achievements in the game that are still bugged, which prevented me from 100%ing it, which is a shame, because it's really freaking good, and I want to have it 100% like the first, but oh well. The people who ported it just decided, nope, you are not worthy. And I wonder who even did port it here. I know where we can go to look before I go. So yeah, Engine Software, Xseed, and Marvelous. Also, not to mention, they never patched out the internet connection to launch because Steam Offline mode does not work with it. although they did remove it in the original. But why are we putting this crap in a single player game? I don't know. Bunch of jerks, if you ask me. You know who else is a jerk? Suda himself for regressing a lot in regards between the second and the third game. And that's my problem with No More Heroes 3. I feel like officially this is the point where we jump the shark, because Travis Touchdown returns back to Santa Destroy and has to defend the world from a friggin' powerful army of alien invaders named Prince Fu and his 9 soldiers. Oh, God. I don't even know where to begin. A lot of the bad having to re-earn money, which is even more grind-heavy than the first game, comes back. Some of the boss battles are not exactly exciting. And one of them is a very cheap one-hit KO bullshit thing that I hate so much. Honestly, I like a lot of everything else except some of the gameplay elements in this game. Genuinely, I do feel like that No More Heroes 3 was a bit of a step back from the second game. So, yeah, my short kind of summed it up, but yeah, I don't really know. And I needed just a mindless open world action game after 3 hack and slashes in a row, so I picked up the Saboteur for a cheap price, so I decided to go ahead and play it. The Saboteur was the very last game ever made by Pandemic Studios, the people who made the Battlefront games, Destroy All Humans, Full Spectrum Warrior, and the Mercenaries games. It is basically a World War II themed era game that takes place in German occupied France during the era, and you play as Sean Devlin, based on the real life figure of William Grover Williams, who is a real life British Grand Prix motor racing driver, won the first ever Monaco Grand Prix in 1929, and worked as an agent in France for the British Special Operations Executive here. And basically, yeah, on the whole, the Saboteur actually has a lot in common with Mercenaries and Destroy All Humans, which is no surprise given the studio who made it. But rather, it's decorated in this coded World War II theme. You've got driving, shooting, melee combat, and exploration. You can also use parkour skills to climb up to high buildings to basically escape out of sight or just explore in general. And what's very cool actually is that when you drive through a lot of the German occupied stuff, you have a black and white filter on the in-game map and the environment itself. But as you complete these main and side missions, the environment returns to its natural color, which actually reveals just how beautiful everything truly actually is. If you've never actually played it, though, it's definitely worth a play. It usually goes on sale pretty cheap, I feel like, here. Like, first it was available on GOG, and then I bought it on Steam. Right now it's $10, and you can probably get it at like half price from this most recent sale. It's definitely worth it at that price, and it's... Even though I'm sad that this was basically the last Pandemic had to go out, at least they went out with a bang with this game. Quite frankly, I couldn't think of a better way for them to go out. And to go out for the month of September, oh boy, Lollipop Chainsaw Re-Pop. What a game. Seriously. Like, this is just one of the most batshit games I've ever played in my life. Suda51 knows how to do that very well, and by God, between this and Shadows of the Damned, I think he outdid himself with this one as well. You basically play as a cheerleader named Juliet Starling, who's voiced by Tara Strong in English, and, well, basically she becomes a zombie hunter fighting zombies in a fictional California high school with her boyfriend's head basically attached to her hip. And this game was actually co-written by James Gunn, and you can tell because this man really just knows how to make crazy, witty, batshit, over-the-top, insane dialogue. Like, and in general, the whole game really is. Again, it's another one of those crazy games like Stubbs the Zombie that just sucks you in for how crazy it is, and then you basically end up going through and playing it. Now, I wasn't sure I was going to get this remaster shortly after launch, but after they patched some stuff, including some physics stuff actually to make the breast jiggle like they did in the original game, and beyond that as well, of fixing other bugs and patches, which, to be fair, Dragami Games, who did this remaster, is still dedicated to doing. It actually won me over, and I'm very glad because this game is fucking amazing. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. Like, it is a bit on the short side. Like, you can beat it in like 5 to 6 hours, but damn, is it so much fun. And considering I had an extra Steam card I got here, or Steam code for some extra money, thanks to the now defunct Playbyte, though, still, I mean, it brought the price down, especially when they had a launch after sale and everything. And yeah, I should probably revisit this at some point. There were some other sacrifices, though, with this port, like losing of licensed anime cosplay costumes and most of the licensed soundtrack. But again, a bunch of that has actually been patched in back as well. And it generally, yeah, just play Lollipop Chainsaw if you haven't. It's an awesome game. I wish I could say this year's Horror Fest was actually worthwhile, but alas, I think we flopped this year. I had to cancel Curse the Eye of Isis because two of the other games tried to break my spirit, and the third almost, but thankfully didn't. But still, it starts with Splatterhouse 2010, and I really wish I could like this game more, but this game pushed me to a point where I don't know, I wanted to like it more, but my short summed it up, especially towards the end of the game, where it just feels like you're getting torn apart in 3 to 4 hits on normal difficulty, even with all the upgrades. I may want to make a full review about this game, because this is like if X-Men Origins Wolverine was bad. And generally, I don't even want to speak any more on it. I wanted to like this game more. It shouldn't be $50 to $70. The only reason probably is because it's not available on PC. It's not compatible with Xbox One and on. There's no other port to modern consoles, and in general, because it has the original 3 Splatterhouse games, yeah. Let's just forget this even happened unless I decide to torture myself with a review, because, yeah. MediEvil on PlayStation 4, though. Shockingly, this was actually probably the best one of the bunch, even though I said that this game was like the second coming of Maximo. Now, MediEvil was originally a PlayStation game developed by Gorilla Cambridge, and was inspired by Nightmare Before Christmas. And eventually, it got a sequel. And then it eventually got a reimagining here on the PSP as Resurrection. And then you got MediEvil, the remake on PlayStation 4 from Other Ocean Emeryville. By and large, from what I've seen, it's pretty faithful to the original game, but it also has a bunch of quality of life improvements. It's a basic platformer where you're going around as the main character, so Daniel Fortesque, hacking and slashing enemies, hunting for areas to find upgrades, going through bosses, and generally working his way all the way to the end, basically, to stop an invasion of a kingdom while redeeming himself. In a way, unlike Splatterhouse 2010, there are instances in this game where you get better, and you actually feel that you get better with the upgrades as you go through the game, genuinely. And yeah, it's tough, but I would say definitely easier than Maximo 1, but maybe a little bit more, maybe not as tough as the second Maximo. Oh, no. Out of the 3 games, the 2 Maximos and MediEvil, because that's what it reminds me of the most. Maximo 1's at the top. I would probably put Maximo 2 maybe in third place, and then MediEvil would be in second place, because there still is some other difficult stuff in this game with a lot of the platforming and having to be mindful of your health and checkpoints and everything. But you know what? I actually still enjoyed this the best out of everything, and yeah, maybe MediEvil 2 will get a remake. I don't know. We'll see. And the last game of the bunch, Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Oh, why? Now, I actually had this one for years. Back in the day, like when GameStop was trying to get rid of all their Xbox stuff. And I remember seeing this ad for this one on the Cartoon Network Toon Tour of mystery DVDs. But alas, I never actually played it. And even when I got it, it just sat in my backlog until I decided to play it for 2024 Horror Fest. You play as a young boy Cooper who sets out to rescue his girlfriend from a haunted mansion infested with supernatural creatures. It's actually more in common with like the Buffy game for the Xbox rather than like some of Rare's other classic platformers, even though it has some of those elements. And this was originally a GameCube game, and you could absolutely feel it with how you played it via the controls. Ultimately, though, it starts off fun at first, but eventually halfway things start to go off the rails, and by the time you reach the lab, it becomes some of the most unfun things I've ever dealt with in a game. Generally, one of the worst. It's a shame, because if not for the bad, I could easily more recommend it. Plus, the emulation itself was not particularly great. You can play this better on Xbox One and on, but since I don't, I had to do this, and well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day I'll revisit it and it will be better, but as of now, I'm just tired, boss. Next. November, always where things start to cool down, although this game was technically a leftover from, well, not really Horror Fest, so I was just playing it in my spare time, and given the fact that this finally went on sale on Steam, I went ahead, added it to my backlog, and played through it, and it seems like oh my goodness, don't tell me I beat this. Yeah, this is what I was playing on Election Day, and I ended up beating it after enough work. The Typing of the Dead Overkill. Or should I say the House of the Dead Overkill? I guess that depends on how you play this particular PC port. As House of the Dead Overkill originally came out on the Nintendo Wii, and it was very much a non-canonical prequel to the original game chronologically, and the first to be a solely home console game. In this game here, basically, you can either play as, well, Special Agent G, or what's his name? Police Detective Isaac Washington, who I'm pretty sure is about as foul-mouthed as Samuel L. Jackson in his most foul movie. What is that? Samuel L. Jackson most foul-mouthed film, because he's been in a lot. I have even no idea, although Jonah Hill was humble to beat him with The Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, I don't even really know here. Whatever, just think of the most foul-mouthed Samuel L. Jackson film on steroids you can think of, and that's basically Isaac Washington. But yeah, it's wild. It has a lot of inspiration from Grindhouse, which is basically the double feature of Robert Rodriguez's Death Proof and Quentin Tarantino's, or not Robert Rodriguez. What am I saying? Planet Terror was Robert Rodriguez, and Quentin Tarantino was Death Proof. I can't get this shit right, man. I'm sorry here. My brain is all over the place and kind of broke right now as I try to go through this because it was a hectic holiday. But okay, House of the Dead Overkill does try to at least extend a bunch of other stuff at the end of the day and allows you to do dual wielding once you unlock it. You can actually have all these other power-ups and collectibles and all sorts of other things to find and shit. And genuinely, it's a wild game, and I love the aesthetics of it and its grindhouse nature. Like, genuinely, I think that makes it so much wild to play. Like, if you've never actually have as well, it's definitely worth one playthrough at least. Like, again, like I say, I feel like I say that about a lot of games on here, but you know what? That's beside the point. But yeah, if you especially like Grindhouse, Death Proof, and Planet Terror, you will probably also enjoy this, especially if you also like House of the Dead. The Typing of the Dead PC port does also give you the option to play with a mouse and keyboard, so you can just shoot them as well with a mouse or a controller. And there's a bunch of downloadable dictionaries and multiplayer after an update. So, the good news is, at least, is that, yeah, it did eventually start going on sale on Steam again recently, so I picked it up and I friggin' loved it. Because this is one of the only House of the Dead games I hadn't played up to this point. I think I've played a little bit of Scarlet Dawn, but not beaten that one. I'll have to try one day, but we'll see. Yeah, but play House of the Dead or Typing of the Dead Overkill if you want the type experience, and yeah. Next up is Splatoon 2. Now, when I got my Switch, I knew the Splatoon games were ones I wanted to get, and I'm glad I did. They both actually, 2 and 3, have decent campaigns in them. And basically, the basic plot here is that after Pop Idol Marie defeats her cousin and fellow squid sister Callie after the events of the final Splatfest in Splatoon, they drift apart in the months following the event, and basically, Marie then returns home after leaving Inkopolis to see her parents and discovers the great Zapfish that powers the city has gone missing again, as has Callie. And with the evil Octarians once again involved, Marie has to take up her role as Agent 2 of the new Squid Beaks platoon and recruit an Inkling from Inkopolis Square, you, the player character, to become Agent 4 and investigate. So, Splatoon is basically like a mix of, I would say, De Blob, your standard other third person shooter, and other platformer stuff. It's a very unique blend, and after having played through the campaign, it's not hard to see why this is a very beloved franchise, one of modern Nintendo's favorite stuff all around here. And ultimately, while it does have a lot of focus and multiplayer stuff, the single player mode is still very worthy at the end of the day, and I think it's a pretty cool game on the whole. It's very straightforward, point A to point B, very simple, easy to pick up, and I feel like there's already a lot to been said about it, but genuinely this is definitely worth another play. Like if you got a Switch, you don't even have to play the original Splatoon to jump into it. I'm living proof. I just jumped straight into Splatoon 2 and voila, I enjoyed it. As did I enjoy Splatoon 3. Now, Splatoon 3, though, tried to vary things up. It also had a single player campaign mode, basically, that basically changed a lot of the mission flow. Rather than point A to point B, although there are some levels like it, you basically have a better variety of more weapon types. And also, well, you did in the original, but more so here. But also, you had specific missions to complete, on top of upgrades and other things. And generally, I feel like it tried to be a bit more open ended, but also, you could really kind of progress at it at a faster pace or go at a slower pace here and get more out of it, which is what I ended up doing here. And what can I say? Splatoon 3, some ways I do prefer it over the first, others, or the second, others not so much, but it's a solid game. Again, it is one of the best selling, and I don't know where Nintendo is going to take Splatoon next, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. We already had the Side Order expansion pack, but I guarantee you there's still a way lot more where that came from. But yeah, definitely play the Splatoon games if you haven't already. They're great. Alright, it's December, the last four to close it out. Now, this first one here was technically we started in November, but didn't finish until December. And that's Crash Mind Over Mutant. This was the second of the Radical Entertainment Crash platforming games, and the last one in the series before Activision put the franchise on pause. At last, I end up preferring Crash of the Titans. While Mind Over Mutant tries to make things a little bit more open-ended and open world in the same way of like the original Jak and Daxter, unfortunately there's a lot more backtracking in it towards the end that gets very tedious, very old, and generally drags the game's pacing out even worse than Crash of the Titans. It's a shame because everything else is fine. And also, the camera's not even adjustable as well, which sucks. Ultimately, yeah, it was kind of not horrible. Not the best either, though, but it is what it is, I guess. There is still a lot to like about it with a lot of the humor and what else? Like the humor, the voice acting, like cutscenes, dialogue, and when the gameplay isn't dragging ass, it's perfectly fine. But otherwise, I don't know. Then the next one was Conduit 2. Now, Conduit 2 I wanted to play because I actually really liked the first one here. At last, this game, though, decided to basically use a different engine, the Quantum 3 engine from High Voltage Software, to allow better effects to make it look more like a more modern, like a 360 or PlayStation 3 game, despite running on the Nintendo Wii. Not to mention, you can actually use the classic controller with it, or the Pro, which actually is the better option. But if you do some mapping, you can make it work with a classic controller, as I showed on stream. Sadly, it is a bit on the short side, though. Even though it's a solid shooter and decent enough, it is only like about 4 hours. Not to mention the game ends on a cliffhanger as well, and there has not been a third game since. I'm guessing they'd have to get Sega involved. Heck, there hasn't even been an HD collection for the first two. Which sucks, because I think it's a decent game. But alas, I mean, it is what it is. But it's a pretty basic shooter. There are still some other gripes I have with it, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. And as a result, I can still enjoy it a bit more than other ones that tend to drag out their welcomes. So, yeah. Not much more to say here. So, alas, Conduit 2, it's alright in my book. Then, Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown. Now, I always had wanted to play this one forever, but finally, after waiting and accumulating the stuff through sales, because not every DLC is included in the big Ultimate Edition, which, seriously, that's a pet peeve of mine. Stop it. Yeah, Ace Combat 7 definitely was a very solid game. You play as the pilot Trigger. He's assigned to a penal squadron following an accusation of murder in the midst of a war between Osea and Eurasia. If you played any of the past Ace Combat games, you will probably definitely enjoy this one more than likely. It's very much of the same. A lot of dogfighting, taking down bigger ships. The cutscenes are nice. They're more in line, though, with Ace Combat 5's cutscenes that are more CG oriented, as opposed to the anime style FMVs of 4 and the sort of real actors on Ace Combat Zero and recollection of people who fought in that game's war. In general, it's very much what you would expect as well, and there is some other things to make it better for beginners, so yeah. I honestly always loved the Ace Combat series. I just wonder what Namco's going to do with it next, so yeah. And finally, to close it off, we're going to do Kirby's Return to Dreamland. And Kirby's Return to Dreamland, I mean, what more can I really say about it? He's a little fluffable, marshmallow-like puff-sucking guy who just can adapt to whatever. And yeah, although in Kirby's Return to Dreamland, you can also play through co-op as King Dedede, Meta Knight, and Bandana Waddle Dee. Basically, you have to help an alien named Magolor recover the pieces of the Lore Star Cutter so you can return home, though not everything is as it seems at first. Kirby's Return to Dreamland is actually your proper platforming Kirby game, as Kirby's Epic Yarn did not have those traditional sucking abilities because he wasn't able to, so he used that whip instead, and it was very interesting. But this is more of your traditional suck enemies up and copy their abilities. And it was the first traditional Kirby platforming game since Kirby 64, since there was no traditional platformer for Kirby on the GameCube. It's a decent game, and good, I'd say, as well, although towards the end it tends to go off the rails and get pretty hard a bit. Okay, maybe not pretty hard, but the difficulty definitely shifts gears. Following following the halfway point, I guess, or so. Because this thing actually was supposed to come out on GameCube, but later came out on the Wii. And eventually they re-announced it in 2011, and that's when it came out. Although you can see some elements still carried over, you can sort of tell that it is in a way. But generally, if you want a more traditional Kirby platformer, this one is fine. There are some other things that kind of baffle me, but you know what? It's never overly insane with how some of it is, so like many other Kirby games, so it's worth a playthrough. But if you never played the original version, check out the remake on Switch, Return to Dreamland Deluxe. That one basically, it gives the game a more Klonoa-inspired art style and has some other bonuses as well. It is a full-on remake. And yeah, but either way, or you could play the original on the Wii, it's fine, but just play it in any way, shape, or form. And that is basically the games I played in the year 2024. I accomplished a lot, and I hope to accomplish more in 2025. Before I go, there are a couple things I want to mention. I'll be pushing the Patreon a bit more as I've been using it as a bit of a behind the scenes blog as well for updates as I make my reviews. But I also am considering wanting to maybe add other rewards or whatever else. So I'll be probably making a new end video, like outro, and yeah, they'll probably reflect this. And if anyone wants to see any additional rewards maybe for that or has an idea, you're more than welcome to suggest it. But as of now, it's mostly that as well. And this is eventually so one day I can fund this without having to rely on YouTube AdSense. Because even if I re-get the monetization back after having to be out of the partnership program because of, all the other crazy stuff, I don't find it reliable. But even then, keep in mind, this is still just a hobby for now. But one day, I do want to actually take this further. And yeah, and with all of your help, I can. But alas, one day at a time, we'll focus on what's in front of us right now. And also, just an extra reminder, I do stream on Twitch as well. So, yeah, several nights a week. Things can get pretty hectic over there depending on the game. Easiest way to ask a question or whatever, or any comments, thoughts, concerns, or whatever. Yeah, basically, I have plans and I'm going to try to really go further with them. And especially with 2025 being my 10-year anniversary of game reviews on YouTube, I think we can get some good stuff going. But until then, just stay tuned and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.